I want to thank again, where did Ginger go? Right there. Thank the Greenwich International Film Festival, this entire team. This theater is magnificent. It really does make me feel like this is cinema paradiso. And this is our moment to enjoy film, but tonight it's going to be a conversation. Ginger, thank you. Wendy Stapleton, thank you. And now I think this is the moment where I bring our panelists up onto the stage. So here we go, my friends and colleagues. Coming up to the stage now will be Joie. I'll do it this way. So wait, hold on. Jennifer Karson-Strauss of E60. It is her film, Truth Be Told, that we'll be talking about this evening, followed by Nicole Noren, ESPN Investigative Enterprise Unit Director Producer. Her film is Listen. Joie Jacoby, W Studios and ESPN Films, The Story of Candace Parker, and Michèle Stephenson, 30 for 30 short called Play. And then last but not least, Hannah Storm, ABC News Studios. Her film is Grails, but the rest of us know her as our ESPN badass anchor sports goddess. Please come up on the stage. I think I'll be here. Yeah, so just take a seat. I'll figure it out. And Ginger, is this where I... Right, okay. So,
I'll... Do you want us to
maybe slide down. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, cool.
No problem.
All right.
Who needs a mic? Okay. All right. So this is where normally I would say, cue the videotape. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, here's a sizzle of the work, the beautiful, beautiful work of my friends and colleagues. Please take a look.
There's so many days and nights where you question your decisions and you question whether people are going to love you and care about you. But when it's all said and done, I feel like I'm so much more than this game. And I'm finally in a place where I can just be me. I can just be myself.
Black girls, they are the earliest carriers of Black musical aesthetics. 1, 2, 1, 2.
They created songs, they created dances, and the children created hand games. Black girls are not given the credit that is due them for causing this music to come alive simply through their play.
You know, these sneakers, they're not just sneakers. These sneakers tell stories. If Jordan says, let's collab, that means you're chosen.
We are literally spreading the gospel of golf.
Who are these guys?
Two brothers that had a vision.
So what's the goal?
To change the game.
Y'all are already on fire.
It was dope. It was mind-blowing.
That's legendary.
It's a fly-ass shoe and everybody's gonna want it.
You talk about Grails, well, this is ours, and this is our story.
Boom.
At the 6th minute, from Oregon to Kentucky, North Carolina to New Jersey, Washington State to Florida, every NWSL game stopped.
And I said, honey, they're demanding change. And he said, why? And I said, because some bad things were allowed to happen.
It was a heavy moment, but a moment that needed to happen.
We're going to do something about it.
I was merely a match that lit the rest of the fire.
A new dawn breaks.
This is how pain has purpose. That's how these players took their power back.
It started off like a fairy tale. It's too good to be true.
I'm being blackmailed. They're trying to lure me somewhere.
These parents lost our kid, and you have the audacity to try to cover your ass.
It's not a good strategy to try to keep secrets.
I'm sorry, I couldn't protect their daughter.
I don't know about you, but as our host said, there's something magical about seeing not just our work on a big screen, but that's all right.
Cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So, though I have a bunch of notes, and I'm going to try not to use them, each and every one of these films are incredibly powerful. And what I'd like to do is give each of you your flowers just for a minute. This is when I'm going to use my notes and just say a little bit about each of you, because I think it's super important for this audience, especially during Women's History Month, to know the power of not just their work, but their work as women and their work as women as filmmakers. So this is where I use my notes. Just for a minute, and I'm not going to do it in order because my papers are not in order. So, Joie Jacoby, raise your hand. Joie Jacoby. Oh, you know what? First, let me say something else. Every single woman on this stage is award-winning. A round of applause, please. I'm a shameless promoter for my friends and colleagues. So Joie Jacoby is an Emmy Award-winning director, writer, executive producer, and showrunner who started making short films with her family's camcorder when she was a teen. Her directorial feature debut was a 2008 ESPN film, Return to Mexico City, which followed Tommy Smith and John Carlos as they returned to the site of the 1968 Mexico City Olympics on the 40th anniversary. She is the director of our Candace Parker film. Next will be, at the end, Hannah Storm. Hannah Storm. What do I have to say? Maybe I just say like Hannah. Hannah, producer, journalist, director, pioneer, advocate for children's issues, published author, and most recently, she has her own women-led production company called Brainstorms, which is the company that has given us Grails, her spectacular work that is being featured on Hulu right now. We also have with us this evening, paper, please.
No, you need an assistant for your
paper,
right?
You got
It's
me?
hard.
Okay, thank
there you. Go.
It's like all these sheets of paper. I'm killing trees.
You're doing great.
Oh, Jen. Jen is a director for ESPN's documentary television show E60. Her work at ESPN began nearly 6 years ago when she moved across the country from Southern California to pursue her passion for long-form storytelling. And before this, she had graduated from Pepperdine University, where she played Division I soccer, and later moved on to become a freelance producer who crafted her stories for the NFL Network, Fox Sports, Time Warner Cable, Sportsnet, and others. And I'd just like to throw in a little bit here that she has taken time to join us this evening while she's on maternity leave after recently giving birth to her 1-month-old son. Michèle Stephenson. Filmmaker, artist, author, Michèle pulls from her Caribbean roots to think radically about storytelling and disrupt the imaginary in nonfiction spaces. She tells emotionally driven, personal stories of resistance and identity that center the lived experience of communities of color in the Americas and the Black diaspora. I'd also like to throw in that her film, besides ours, which is called Play, she just won the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival for her.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
For her Afro-futurist feature documentary called Going to Mars, which is the story of Nikki Giovanni. Yes. Nicole Noren. Nicole is, yes, an award-winning director, producer, and journalist for ESPN's Investigative unit. Nicole has produced more than 50 investigative reports and short documentaries for ESPN. All right, I'm going to just do this. 5 Emmys, 2 Edward Murrow Awards, and a Peabody. And so much of her work has been centered on reporting on gender-based violence. And a fun fact, you spent a year on a boat?
Yeah, I lived on a sailboat for a year.
Okay, all right, my one fun fact for the night. All right, so there's our crew. I'd like to... Too many papers, so little time. I was initially going to read and talk about each of their films, but why not have each of our brilliant filmmakers give their elevator pitch about their film and what motivated them to make the film that they have. And I'll start here with you, Jen. Yeah.
I know.
I'll swap with you. I got your papers. You got my mic. We're teammates here. Yeah. I mean, the motivation for E60's Truth Be Told came when, you had mentioned I've played soccer my whole life. I played at a high level. I played with and against a lot of the women that are in the National Women's Soccer League. Oh, is it? It's on. I'll speak louder. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, the NWSL was a league that is a league that I've played with and against women that are in that league. In October of 2021, there was this moment of solidarity that happened in the middle of a game, which has not happened before. That you're seeing all these women across every single game stop play in the 6th minute. And 6 represented the number of years that these women were silenced after trying to report allegations of harassment, sexual harassment, verbal and emotional abuse. And as I was watching that moment play out, especially being at ESPN, I just knew the platform that we have there to be able to lift these women's voices up and really tell a bigger and greater story around what was actually happening within this league. And to tell it from the most journalistic, in a journalistic way that we got both sides. We were able to speak with, ex-commissioners, ex-players, ex-coaches to really get to the bottom of what was happening within not only this league, but the professional leagues that folded before it. And so what we were able to uncover was this, it was an investigative deep dive on the mismanagement and the fact that these women were taken advantage of for playing the game that they love. And it got to a point where they finally said, it's not enough anymore just to play the game that we love. We have been mistreated. We have been abused in so many different ways. And so I think what you see in this film is an empowering story, not just a story of victims, but women really standing up together and realizing what power they do have in their voice. And in that we saw unprecedented change, not only across the league, but in women's sports, period. So I was incredibly grateful to be a part of a fabulous team at E60 to bring that to our audience. And we saw massive change after the documentary ran on ESPN. Coaches were fired. never allowed to coach again in the NWSL. There were other huge changes that were made within the league so that women that come after these women will never have to go through what these women did.
It's wonderful. It's such a impactful story, and change came because of the work that you did. Nicole, your story, also investigative in nature, also impactful, is also deeply personal for you as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your film?
Yeah, Listen, it just came out last night on Hulu and ESPN Plus, or ESPN Plus on Hulu, and a digital story as well on the app on ESPN.com. Is the story of a University of Utah track and field athlete named Noren, who, after being stalked and harassed by an ex-boyfriend, sought help on numerous occasions with different officials and was ignored. She ended up being murdered by this man, and our 4-year investigative piece, multi-platform, went into all the failures that occurred before and after actually Lauren's death. But it's very personal for me. I am a survivor myself of dating violence, and I'd never talked about it before a few days ago. But these kind of stories mean a lot to me because I don't think they're told right a lot. You don't see a lot of nuance that goes into how relationships become toxic and all the warning signs. And I just also connected with Lauren to know like how brave she was to come forward and seek help immediately when she found out this man had lied and about his age and his identity. So yeah, it became, but we also just knew we had an opportunity to pull back and look at all the failures and create some change, and hopefully that happens after this. It just came out last night.
So got to make sure everybody watches. Joie, your film, though not an investigation, is also deeply personal for Candace. And I think you've described it as a bit of a coming-of-age story, yes?
Yeah, hi. For someone who's so well-known, I think we get to see how she became the person that she is. And it's very much a coming-of-age story from childhood to now, of a person who is extremely gifted, extremely talented, so much pressure put on her from a very young age, and so many expectations put upon her. And she's always met them, and she's always succeeded. But the image part was what was so interesting to me about Candace, and I think that's why I was drawn to make the film. I had, been a huge fan of her as an athlete, but also someone who had seen the way she was portrayed through this lens of a beautiful athlete, someone who could be a Black woman, yet, desired and sort of that sort of part of her. And then to find out what was going on behind the scenes with her. And Marsha, you were there when we had our very first pitch, and she was very open, and she was really ready to finally tell her story and really go there. So felt really honored that she trusted all of us to do that. But I think it's really a story of someone who had a lot put on her and felt that she had to be a certain person. She had to perform a certain way in terms of her work, in terms of her personal life. And we see through this film that she's finally comfortable being who she is. So it was a beautiful thing to be witness to, and I think we documented it. So I feel very lucky.
And it's great. Can't give you the air date yet, but soon. Michèle, your film is about creativity perhaps creativity that has not been recognized in ways that it should be and heralded. Again, the theme at all of our stories here are deeply personal. Tell us a little bit about how you came to want to tell this story that at this time is so perfect as we mark the 50th anniversary of hip hop.
Yeah, so not only is it about creativity, but it's also about the influence of the creativity of Black women on the entire, American popular culture, not just hip hop, but beyond. And so I'm really honored to be able to engage and communicate with some of the women who have studied this and who have sort of laid a stake on the ground about this influence that's led in many cases to appropriation, which we talk about in the film. But also it is a celebration of the creativity. And I just want to sort of thank Marsha and ESPN Films and 30 for 30 and Adam Newhouse, this came as a result of, in the development division, of some brainstorming where we really wanted to think outside of the box and we're really given the space, not only to think outside of the box, but to create something that the piece itself is creative too, in honor of women's expression, Black women's expression. And so from that brainstorming, we came across the book of Kira Gaunt, who you saw in the clip, and she's been a champion of Black Girls Hang Games, Double Dutch, really as an ethnomusicologist, really breaking it down in terms of the polyrhythms and what has been preserved from the Middle Passage and how that's been transposed to our culture here in America. And so I'm just honored to be able to share this, and I'm really excited about next steps with the film.
As are we. Hannah, when you think about your film, though we are here marking Women's History Month, your characters are two young Black entrepreneurs, male, but you bring something to the table, not only as a journalist and a sports historian, that you looked at the subject of golf, a bastion of whiteness.
And say that again.
Yeah.
Caucasian clause since 1963.
There you go.
Need we say more?
Why do this story?
And I've done, I started my production company even before I came to ESPN back in 2008, really to have sort of the power to tell my own stories. It's with my partner, Carmen Belmont, who's here tonight. And, I was thinking, so there's these huge commonalities in the world, right? And I know there's a lot of kids here tonight. I see some of our buddies from Stanford. Thanks for being here. Music, sports, sneakers, stuff that everybody loves, right? How do you take something like that and affect true change in a sport that really needs it? So what I did is took the story of these two golfers who had won an HBCU golf championship at Morehouse many years ago. One was a really good golf pro, one of the top in the US teaching. And the other one had always tried to make it as a professional on tour, but he couldn't get people to invest in him as a young Black golfer. Fast forward a few years, they're both kind of in the business world, right? And the guy who tried to make it as a golfer, he was very artistic. He redesigned all their uniforms in college and stuff like that. He was always drawing sneakers and his little notebooks growing up. So he came up with this powerful image of a Black man swinging a golf club with his gold chain going in the other direction, the momentum of the chain going here. Something unlike anybody had ever seen. And then he calls his old friend from college and he's like, "What do you think about this?" And his old friend said, "Put it on a sweatshirt, walk down the street and see what happens." He did it. He had a ton of people stop him. He was like, "I know you got a job and I got a job, but let's just print this on a bunch of keychains and t-shirts and stuff and just go down to the PGA merch show and walk around." And they get an offer from a Japanese company to sell like, I don't know, like 50 sweatshirts. They sell out like that. Then they order 3,000. Then they kind of start gaining some momentum. And through when Jacob Blake was murdered and the NBA was in the bubble, they had because of their passion for golf, and they were really good golfers, Chris Paul, who was the head of the NBA Players Union, had one of their sweatshirts. It just so happened that the day that the NBA walked out and decided not to play, Chris Paul was wearing their sweatshirt. So everybody who was watching CNN and watching all of this coverage saw this big NBA star with this logo that nobody had any idea. Who are these guys? Where did this come from? What is this? And eventually they became the first ever tabbed by Jordan Golf to do a collaboration on a shoe line and a clothing line. They decided to take that avenue of fashion and make a difference in the golf world and say, we belong, our people of color, our young men and women of color belong on the golf course. They should be doing business on the golf course. They not just pros, but they should be walking out, they should be welcome in clubs, in clothing that they're comfortable with. Fashion cannot be a barrier to access or among the barriers to access. I found this story, as you can tell, so passionate about it, and I had to make a real effort to incorporate women into it because it was a story about two young men in an industry where women are marginalized, which is the sneaker industry. So we had to be very proactive to put women in the film, and I don't want to take up any more time, but that's kind of the gist of it. It's a 6-part series, and along with yours is on Hulu, right? So there we go.
All of these stories have a theme. In many ways, they are all stories previously untold. I'll just throw it out to our esteemed filmmakers. When faced with untold stories, what are the kinds of barriers or frustrations that you face because they've not been previously told? We live in a world where people want to see it either on the front page of the New York Times or to have people talking about it widely. You have to convince, oftentimes, even though the story is there, it's true, there's empirical evidence. I'll start with Michèle, because I'm watching your face and I'm feeling the wheels churn. You know, it's your story of rhythm and in some ways historical appropriation or erasure are things that if you pitch this to a news outlet, maybe not so much.
Well, I guess if you look at my body of work, along with my creative partner and life partner, Joe Brewster, we both co-directed play. It's all about setting the record straight. It's all about unearthing what is not present. It's all about, rewriting what's been erased. And so I don't like to think about obstacles. I like to think about opportunities because otherwise, it's what is motivating me to keep doing the work. And part of it is the passion. We're passionate about the story, passionate about the people we met who were involved, so deeply involved, who were also doing the work. And so that further motivates me to go that extra mile that we need to do to go. And then it's about creating a team that's equally as passionate. And I think we were really fortunate to have an archival producer who was on board, who was really looking for the gems in terms of Black life, historical Black life, or young Black girls playing in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and the passion to really dig and find that material. And then the enthusiasm of the female musicians we were working with, who remember those how they started with music, and they started with their hand games. And so it's part of creating a space of mutual support and mutual passion that allows you to keep going through that sort of community. And with that, you tell a story you think is beautiful, and it's shared, and people recognize it and see it, and hopefully everyone will see themselves in some way in the story that we share. So I don't like to, we always have obstacles, but the question is, especially as nonfiction filmmakers who have chosen a profession that is, not an easy one to get through. It's all about, I don't like the seeing the glass half full over versus half, but really turning obstacles and barriers into opportunities, whether they be creative or otherwise.
Joie, what was the biggest obstacle for you, bouncing off of Michèle's last thought, when dealing with a superstar who had previously not shared her full self, if you will, had an image that everyone thought this is who she is, when in fact that was not true? How did you pull her out? Clearly she was ready, but what were some of the obstacles you came up against, even when she said, I want to talk about this, but then I'm sure when asked pointed questions, she may have said, no, I'm not going there.
Yeah, I mean, for people who are in the spotlight and at that level of athleticism, they're so media trained, they're so ready to give you what you want, like what they think people want. And that's something that I think Candace has dealt with her entire career. She's really beautiful. and while that's amazing, and that's great for her, but it's in some ways put her in a box and made her this particular picture of what people wanted her to be for so long. So I think for Candace, it was really just coming to meet her where she was, and seeing, her as just a mother, as a friend, as someone who we have a lot in common in many ways. And just listening and really being there to be like, I just want to hear the real, what was going through your head when you were put in these positions, when you were positioned by your league to be a certain person. How did that feel? And she was really ready to be self-reflective and to tell us how it really was. And pulling archival and showing those things to her too, where it was a revelation. I think it's really a very peculiar place to be a child star. I mean, that's essentially what she is. And when you're someone who from, age 10, everyone wants something from you. I just always take all of my subjects the same way, whether they're someone who's really famous or not, as just seeing the humanity in them and coming to them at that level. And I think she really responded to that and made her feel comfortable. And but I think for her, expectations are just something that she's tried to meet. And this was, I think she's finally in a place in her life where it doesn't matter, and just be you. So that made it a little bit easier. I think when you were saying challenges though, I was surprised to learn just how difficult the life of, and I mean, this, Hannah, from your work, you did the Cheryl Swoops film, the lack of flowers that these amazing athletes get. Like the fact that these women, I mean, Candace had a baby her rookie year. That is, one of the most defining things about her, yet she's performed at this extremely high level the entire time. And she doesn't want to put that to the forefront. She wants her work to speak for itself, as we all do as filmmakers, as worker, whatever you're doing in life. But that is something that is super unique about her, I think, and how she's handled that over the years.
Nicole, Joie just used the word listen, the title of your film. 4 years of, I guess, burrowing yourself in the life of someone who had not been listened to. How challenging was that for you to convince the powers that be that this was a story worth telling, a story that had not been told?
It actually was very challenging. We heard things like, why would anyone care about this random track athlete? Well, she's dead. The parents settled a lawsuit. Why do people care? Yeah, it was hard to, after working on it for a while, to hear those types of things, because you are invested and all the things, like the things that happened that could have prevented her death. So and then hear that kind of stuff, it was hard. It was definitely a battle to get to this point, to keep going. But thankfully, we had a lot of support where we needed it, and the resources and time that we spent on it for 4 years I'm just so grateful to be able to keep going on it. I think it helped that it was a national story, had been touched on in a Dateline episode, but we just kept doing. There's a lot of developments that happened in the story that kept people interested in it, and some of that were prompted by our reporting, and then a really great young reporter at the Salt Lake Tribune, which it's not lost on me at all that there were 2 women going after the school trying to get everything we could, and it was myself and this reporter who happened to be a student at the time. She was young. It's like her biggest story ever. She happened to just be working that night and getting the call, and Courtney's in the film. She's incredible. But yeah, 2 dogged. We were never going to give up. We didn't approach it like a breaking news story too, which was really interesting. I'd never done that, where you step back and we're getting new information, and we weren't reporting it because we were holding and trying to use it to get other stuff that we needed. And it's a very different approach, but I really wanted to take a step back and look at what happened, and how the institutions responded to the tragedy, how different people move forward, and then when new allegations came up, we wanted to see how people responded to those. But yeah, it was a challenge to get people to care about it, but now it seems so obvious why, when you have just vast institutional failure, like why people should care and why it's important, because we all know someone who has been, perhaps sadly, we've all known people that have been in these situations, and people that were ignored when they needed to be heard or believed. And so, yeah, I knew it wasn't always easy, though. That was a great question.
Systemic issues, systemic problems, not being heard. Again, the same is true for you and your film. How did you gain the trust of primarily one character, but the women in this film who had the bravery, which I think in many ways is true for all of the characters of the films that we're showcasing tonight? How did you gain the trust to allow them to be their full self and show how incredibly brave they are?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the biggest challenges. This film had many characters. It wasn't just, Mana Shim ends up emerging as a main character for us, but we're doing a story of every single team across this league going back to other leagues as well. And so it was constantly, that was the thing that stressed me out the most, was trying to make sure that these women knew that they could trust us and that we would tell their story right. And so I think the way that I approached it, was said earlier on this panel, is treating them like humans, and making sure that I wasn't trying to just pop a camera in their face immediately. I tried really hard to have a phone call first, or, you know, in the world we live in now, have a Zoom meeting or something in that way, to make sure that they could ask any question that they had to me at any point in the filmmaking process. We weren't allowed to obviously show it to any of the people that were in the film before it aired, but I wanted them to know that I cared about their stories, and that the world would care about their stories, whether they were a soccer fan or not, whether they were a women's sports fan or not, that this was going to touch people, and that ultimately, hopefully, it was going to make a difference. And that I think the other part was like me being human and telling them, like, being honest with them, that this was going to be hard to talk about, and that it was going to be emotional, and that they were going to have to let their guards down. But if they did, and they were able to sit in that chair and go through it with us, that there was going to be something really impactful that would come from it. And as much of a struggle as it was sitting down in that chair, and Lisa Salters, our incredible reporter, did, you know, so many of these interviews, and she's incredible at being able to earn the trust of these women as well. I think that they were just able to know that we were going to tell their story in the right way, and tell it in a way that was, you know, journalistically sound. We were working really, really hard, and our incredible team at E60, we worked so hard to make sure that we had the facts right, and that, you know, there were 2 investigations going on at the same time. I don't think we had ever done that, where usually an investigation has concluded and then you're doing a story. These 2 investigations were ongoing. And so getting the women to be able, and not just the women, but men too in the story, to be able to open up, knowing that they could have easily been like, I'm going to wait till this investigation is over. They decided to be courageous and take that leap, and know that that people were going to see it, and they were going to respond to it, because it wasn't just the soccer world. We were going to be able to put it out on the platform that ESPN has, and people were going to be able to take notice. And I think we saw that with the response. And I think, like, the most impactful message I got after was from one of the athletes that was in the story, and she only had a number of sound bites, but she said something to the effect of that this is going to change things for the women's game forever. And that really hit home for me, especially having a little daughter who I hope one day plays soccer. And that hopefully work like this, work that so many of these women are doing as well on this panel, that she won't, and other women won't have to deal with the same things. So.
Untold stories, challenges. One of the questions that I have for all of you is, I know a little bit about the hope that your work is impactful, but what else is it that you want people to know about the work that you've done with each of these films? And what is it that you bring individually, as it's Women's History Month, as women filmmakers, that you know nobody else could bring?
I mean, I didn't really answer your challenges question, but I think this does speak to that. I know that, like, my story sounded great, right? Like, oh, what an awesome story. I can't even tell you how difficult it was to pull off, because you, at the epicenter of it, you're criticizing a sport. You are enlightening an audience as to systemic racism in a sport. You're also enlightening them into sneaker culture, why it's powerful, who Michael Jordan is. And so I had to deal with the PGA Tour, PGA of America, the NBA, Michael Jordan personally, okay, because he's his own entity, right? The NBA doesn't even license, Jordan footage. It goes right to him. And Nike, hello, how fun. So I would say that being on the air has worked both ways. It's been extremely difficult at times to establish myself as a director and producer. at times I've been only allowed to do projects for ESPN. At times I have been allowed to do projects for anyone other than ESPN. You know, it's gone all around the circle. I would say the good thing is being able to, I had to call a commissioner of one of the leagues for this. And I did. And I had to have meetings with huge groups of people to give impassioned pleas about why we should be able to do this and why we should be able to shoot here and why should you license your footage here. And, you know, it was really, really hard. And at the same time, I decided, you know, the leagues are a challenge, but, you know, pop culture could go there and help tell my story. So I was able to access someone like DJ Khaled, Fat Joe, you know, Damon John. So I'll say that those connections, the ability to do that and make those phone calls and meet those challenges, because it's really hard to tell an untold story when you have to tell it with like huge entities that they all want to protect, you know, their territory. So I don't know, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like you need people to take you seriously along with these incredible artists, which, you know, I've been doing this since 2008 at the same time. Sometimes it does help. So, you know, to be sort of front and center and have covered these sports for now, I'm 60, so God, that's horrible. I don't know, decades and decades and decades of going back and covering these sports, you know, covering MJ's whole career. You know, sometimes, you know, you have to do what you gotta do, and those relationships are important. So there you go.
I'm just gonna say, you know, when you brought up the league stuff, like, I'm dealing with one of the greatest of all time athletes. She's a woman though, and there's just less that's given for women. And for an example is the NBA. And I'm really, you know, these WNBA players, they are mentors. They are the role models for all of the children that are watching them, that are women in sport. Yet you wouldn't believe how difficult it is to get the NBA to license footage for these, to uplift these players. And it was very frustrating. It was really frustrating to be confronted with this, how little they cared, I thought, you know, in terms of trying to give us what was needed to be able to tell the full story of this tremendous athlete.
People give a lot of lip service. We want, we want people of color to be in golf. We want women to do this. We want women to do that. You know, and sometimes when it really comes down to the hard tacks of business, it's a different story, and you really have to push, and you really have to make a personal plea to do that. Yeah, it can be frustrating. Yes, I understand.
Michèle, think about what you've just heard and place your story in the context of the diaspora, your ancestors, pride, and telling this story, knowing that it's kind of been lost. People see what they want to see today, but they have no history. And I know that there's a line here that says sounds like you don't know where you're going unless you know where you're coming from.
I was thinking a little bit about what was being discussed, and I think in some ways there's kind of the long game and then there's the shorter game, sort of. And I always think about the long game too, in terms of who is the first audience when I'm making something. I am my first audience, right? I feel the pride, I feel the connection. And that's what helps me carry forward. And there's no better sort of satisfaction than when I have another Black woman come up and feel either the pride or the connection of the story being told, and feeling that there is a change that has happened right there in terms of going back to the outside world, or for younger girls, you know, to see to see themselves, and to see themselves represented, to see the stories told differently. So I think that for me is the first agenda in terms of even healing for myself, honoring, where I come from, but also the connection. So part of doing away with the erasure is really for our own self-satisfaction and our own sense of self. And I think that that's really, really powerful. And that if you leave that, becoming a better filmmaker, I went for films, in history that maybe were not taught to me or that were not part of the main canon, but I sought for, and they were there. They were there. There was a history. There was a history to be uncovered. So part of it is being witnessed to. Part of it is setting the historical record straight so that it is there, so those who search will find. And then part of it is just connection with others who can see themselves reflected. So yeah.
Nicole, Jen. Setting historical records straight is exactly what both of your films did. But in both of your films, I have to imagine that you came up against perhaps the wall of journalism and the separation between church and state, and the not necessarily lived experience for both of you, but the understanding as women and the trust that you built with your characters to say, I know this to be true. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's always a really fine line. I usually do pretty heavy investigative stuff, and we really try to separate. It's hard when you're trying to build trust with people, and get them to, there's nothing else but just to be authentic and be yourself. There's nothing else you can do. But it's very interesting when you spend a lot of time. I've had a few different stories like this, sadly, where I have parents who have lost a child. And there's always a clear separation. You have to really be careful when you're interviewing people to not take everything they say and not. I mean, I cannot get that personal at all. Like for instance, the McCluskeys, Lauren's parents, had no idea about anything in my personal life. I'd never told them anything that I had experienced, something that was in the realm of what their daughter did, and they just heard about it for their first time Friday. And then her conversation with me after was really interesting, and it kind of became clear to her then in that moment why I cared so much. And she already knew I cared a lot, because I wanted to hold people accountable who hadn't done the right thing and tried to save her daughter when they could have. But it just hit on a different level then, and it's a very interesting dance to remain objective and try to tell the story fairly. But yeah, I always kind of look forward to after you're done and you don't have to have that barrier up. Sometimes it gets a little tiring, to be honest. But
yeah, I mean, for me, we're we're trying to get the trust of these women, and how, we spoke about untold stories. Like these women, a number of them are still playing in the National Women's Soccer League. It's not like they're done playing, they've got nothing to lose. They still could be fired essentially from their organization, from their team. And these were things that we were seeing already. And so for them to boldly step forward, knowing how much they had to risk, knowing what was on the line, made it all the more personal for me. And like you said, you don't want to get too personal with your subjects, and you also want to be transparent. That's something that I always try to do as well. And while we were having really intimate conversations, multiple hour-long interviews with Mana Shim, with all these women who were really telling these powerful testimonies, we were also talking with, Richie Burke, who had been fired after saying racially insensitive things that he still stood by, even when we were interviewing him. And, not understanding the jokes that he was saying that were wrong and inappropriate. We were interviewing the commissioner, the ex-commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, who had been fired for turning a blind eye, for not listening to these women who did try to say their truth. And U.S. Soccer as well, former and present president of U.S. Soccer. And so while I'm having, we're having these really in-depth personal interviews with our main characters, these women athletes, they also were asking, oh, you talked to my coach, you talked to this person, and that instantly gave them fear and made them feel worried about what was going to be a part of the film. And my approach was to just be transparent with them about we're telling your story and we're just doing it in an authentic way. And so we were constantly kind of going through that as the film was developing, and we were in production for a year on it, and it was constantly getting questions asked of, did you talk to my coach? What did U.S. Soccer say? And them worrying for their jobs, which is their whole life. Their whole life is this job, is this sport. It's not a 9-to-5. It's their identity. And so that was a challenge, but also something that I think we tried to do it, to the best of our ability to make sure that we were playing it straight, and that we weren't getting too connected one way or the other, because we had to tell just the most authentic, journalistically sound story.
Did any have repercussions? I was curious. Like, did any of them have any pushback from their participation?
See, this is what happens when you get like producers on a panel.
I'm just so curious.
The players did not. I did get some phone calls from the ex-commissioner and people that did end up sitting down that were upset about how they were portrayed. But at the end of the day, we put out exactly what they said. We didn't twist any words. We presented, exactly what came out of their mouths, essentially. But in terms of the athletes, I think for them, seeing the response of people supporting them afterwards. I mean, the National Women's Soccer League is not something that many people know about, even at ESPN. It's something that, it's not the WNBA. It's not a man's sport. That's something that it's another barrier that we all have to face, is telling women's sports stories. And so for the women that were a part of it, I didn't hear of any hesitations or doubts. I will say we had cut the film and we had a version that we were getting closer to really liking without Monishin. We couldn't get Monishin to be a part of it, and she was the first person to come forth about her allegations against Paul Riley, who had harassed her and her teammate. And we did not have Monishin. And we ended up, once we were able to get her and earn that trust, we recut the whole thing. And I'm so glad that we did, because she was such a huge part of it, a huge vehicle for the story. But that was, when we're talking about trust, it took telling her of the interviews that we had done for her to be rest assured that we are telling the right story, and we're telling your story. And so I'm appreciative for everybody at ESPN for the extended time that we got to make sure that we took a step back and said, no, we need more time to do this the right way now that we have the right voices in it.
So time flies. Do we have an opportunity for questions? Okay. But I live in New York. Okay. Okay. All right. So if anyone has a question, please. Okay.
Hi, it's nice meeting all you guys. My name is Martine. I'm actually a graduate student getting her master's in sports psychology. And with all the things that's been going on in sports, Brittany Griner's story really hit me. Right now, the average amount that a WNBA player makes is about $150,000 a year. And the highest paid WNBA player makes about $250,000 a year compared to Steph Curry, who makes $48 million a year. So I just want to know, is that a story worth any of you guys presenting on 30 for 30 or ESPN Films? Because I think it's important to spotlight Brittany Griner, especially her story, the fact that she had to go to Russia in order to make more money to play the sport that she loves, where men, they don't have to do that unless they're not drafted. Women don't have that option. And most of the women, as you know, in the WNBA are African American women. And to see what happened to her, you know, she made a poor choice, of course. But why does she have to go to a whole nother country to play a sport that she loves?
I think everyone on this panel has to answer that.
If I could, it's a great question.
Yeah, that's an issue that has been there. I mean, it's a systemic issue, right? And the WNBA, which has a much shorter season, you know, they play during the summer in the arenas when the NBA does not occupy it, and it's really at the heart of so many issues. You know, women who have had to go play overseas, as you so beautifully point out, and then subsequently have had to deal, as Brittany did, with the loss of that country, and in her case being really a scapegoat for the Ukraine conflict and everything that was going on there. So yeah, it's an issue that definitely deserves exploration, and it's something that we talk about. You know, you might see a long protracted feature once in a while on a sports center or something like that, but it's certainly worthy of being explored in a film. I do think, though, to put a personal face on that, you would have Brittany would have to want to tell her story. I'm sure she's and her people have been negotiating and speaking with, you know, many people about her story when the right time and place is. But that really brought a light to something that is decades in the making.
Hannah, just jumping off of that, the first story that I worked on when I got to ESPN, I was an associate producer, so I was just helping out on it, but we did actually go with Brittany to Russia and got to talk to her a little bit about her experience and why, you know, this powerful, dominant woman in the WNBA, why she had to go there. And you could see, too, as a woman who has dreadlocks down to her back, who looks different than everybody there, who also is gay, and all of those things that she has to deal with going to this country that does not accept her. Right. I think, you know, at E60, I know we've talked about bringing this up again, especially now that there is everything that's happened with her story. And I think you make a great point about the fact that I still don't think that it's known enough. It's told enough about the fact that, you know, why does somebody who plays in the WNBA have to go play in a foreign country, away from their loved ones, away from their family?
It's a big part of the story that we tell in the Candace film. You'll see it. That's a huge defining part of her life. For most of her career, she spent with 2 weeks off for the whole year. And Brittany actually took Candace's place on that team. She was on that team for the last 6 years before Brittany joined. So what you learn in the film is the nuance behind that, that this is how these women are able to support their families, that they have to make this sacrifice in order to live. And beyond that, it's the wear and tear on their bodies. Can you imagine if LeBron played year round? He's the same age as Candace. They both got the Gatorade award the same year when they were in high school. And the miles that are on Candace's body, when you compare that to her peers, her male peers, her counterparts, it's beyond. And so when you look at the surgeries, the shoulder injuries, the knees, the ACLs, like literally, like she shows it all, and it's all from all of that constant on her body. So that's a big part that you'll see in my film, because I thought it was one of the most important things to really highlight, for people to really know that the best players in the world have to leave their country in order to make a living. And that's just where we are. You know, I don't know what the solution is for this problem.
I think that there needs to be at the NCAA level, now that we have name, image, and likeness, there needs to be real true investment by businesses in women's sports. They have the opportunity to do it now. It's starting, as you can see, with Miami. But I think that's where it needs to start, is people really, honestly, American businesses putting their money behind female athletes. And now they have the opportunity to do that at the college level. That's really where it needs to start.
I just want to say one thing. We cannot divorce sports from the rest of society. So whatever's happening in sports is a reflection of what's happening in the rest of society and how we're being treated. So the work is everywhere.
I guess I'll go. I'm going to put my friend Jennifer on the spot here, but it's a question that is applicable to all you wonderful ladies up there. Jen, I remember you and I had a lot of conversation. You referenced about that commissioner you had to interview and what a tough interview it was, and specifically how he treated you in that interview and how you handled it. And I was so proud of you about how you handled it. And I know it's something I'm sure all you women have faced, being in the field, asking tough questions, particularly to men who feel however they feel about like trying to intimidate. And can you, if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about how you handled that tense interview and how you prepared, and then ultimately just how you stood your ground and were able to deliver a great interview?
Yeah, I mean, Lisa Salters handled the one with the ex-commissioner. The great thing about Lisa, and we prepared really hard for some of the answers we thought we were going to get from Lisa Baird. Lisa Baird also lied in the chair to Lisa Salters, and Lisa was able to manage that and keep her on the fire and just asking simple, open, honest questions. My experience with Sunil Gulati, who is the ex-president of U.S. Soccer, I was the one doing that interview, and I had camera rolling as he walked in, knowing that he might say something. Didn't end up it didn't go in the film, but this was after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on live television, and I had just opened up by saying, thank you for sitting down with us. If you can just, this is what we're going to talk about. And he said, as long as you're not Chris Rock, I won't be Will Smith. And that's how the interview started. And this is a story about women being harassed and abused. So I wanted that in our trailer. It didn't make the cut, but it's just a matter of, not being scared, I think, to ask the hard questions and not being somebody who's intimidated, especially by men who are looking to, I'm a 32-year-old woman, looking to kind of take advantage of the situation and essentially bully me. And that's why I was so passionate about telling this story, because I saw these women be bullied. I saw them be taken advantage of. So as a young female director, I was sitting there in that moment I'm not going to let this person try to intimidate me and bully me in this moment. And I wanted to use it just to be and I'm smart enough to know that you were going to say something like that, and I was rolling camera.
So, would you indulge us for just one last question, Sarah?
So as someone who's been on a lot of these panels and spoken a lot about the challenges that women have in telling stories of women athletes, and also in then having them seen, you've all produced these incredible things that are likely to win awards and very much are certainly going to be seen by the people who already care. What do you wish you could have done now and in the future for future products that you create from the people who are the gatekeepers and the higher ups to make sure that more people see these stories? And so that when you do get those first battles of investment and time, which you're so grateful to have, then after it's been made, that they put as much a priority on those stories being as valuable as the ones that are more palatable to the general public, so that they become something that they'll invest in the future.
I'll think of something. How about any story that's about a female doesn't automatically go on ESPNW only? No offense, I love ESPNW too, but it's like an automatic thing where there's this separation still happening at our company and others. Yeah, to have it, and it's very silly to like, I don't know. That's one tangible thing. I've been at ESPN for a long time, over 20 years, and I think it's changing for the better. But I had this thought, like as I was moving up my career, that the only stories being told about women here are they're either a victim or a sex object, and I've seen it change a lot more for the good, but it's still sometimes that you fall in those tropes and it's hard. But yeah, I'll think more about that. Other people maybe have other things to answer Sarah's.
Well, I think when you talk to a bunch of networks and distributors and investors, everybody wants true crime. So it starts there, right? And then it's like true crime, or we want like big swings, right? We want the Last Dance, right? We want, the OJ. We want, it has to be that, right? So it's like that, and then everything else, right? And there's so many incredible, I guess what maybe some of these big entities would consider like a small story, but they're like, wow, if it doesn't sell to a huge audience, if it's not like attached to like a huge person, if it's not going to be globally distributed where everybody wants to watch it, I feel like there's so many small, impactful, interesting, inspiring stories that just aren't being told because the mandates at the top level aren't to tell those stories. And I just wish with all my heart it was a little bit more balanced, right? That you could take something really, really cool and small, but like people would watch and be so inspired by, something like Mad Hot Ballroom or something, just a world that you could like dive into and see what like teachers and kids are doing, for example, like something on that level, like so fundamental to our everyday lives. And sometimes I just don't think that the big folks out there in our world are seeing those. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of what we call an independent documentary filmmaking community engagement, or some of us call a chitlin circuit. The idea that you can go out with the material with the right support and funding. I've done it in the past. We've done it with previous films where the films have had a 3-year, 5-year life beyond the end of the film being aired or streamed. But it requires labor, focus, knowing the audience that you are targeting or that you want to engage with, and really going from city to city with these films and having that impact on a one-on-one community level. These theaters, there's a lot of power there, but you also need the funding to be able to do that. And there's also money because people will come and pay to watch and to spend the time to talk about the impact of what they've just seen. But I think that there is in this way a myopia. I'm sorry, I mispronounced that. People are myopic. A myopic view of what it means and where money can actually be made. And so there's a level of laziness, I would say, in terms of not wanting to sort of engage in what does this other audience want. The audience is there. We have to meet them and do the work that it needs to be done, where there will be money to be made out of it.
I think that's so true. So much people don't give audiences enough credit for what they actually enjoy. And there's so many, little films that I've made over the years where I've learned the impact that it's made when people actually got a chance to see it. So there's an audience for these stories. It just, we just need to get them out there. And so I think what you're saying about putting the promotion out there and being proactive, because when they see it, they want to see it and they love it. So.
Well, I think that this film festival and this theater are a perfect example of giving the audience what they want. So I want to thank the Avon Theater. I want to thank the Greenwich International Film Festival. I'd like to thank Ginger and Wendy for their kindness, for inviting us back again for the second year in a row. and I will encourage you to help distribute all of these films to your Greenwich International Film Festival posse, so they'll know how to find these films. And I just want to say I'm honored to be on the stage with each of you. I think your work is extraordinary, and you know, it's the end of Women's International Month, but it's every day. We do the work every day, and I really hope that this has been enlightening and enjoyable, and that we'll see you again next year.
Yes.